My name is Don Taylor. I'm the president and CEO of Welty Building Company. We're a construction manager, general contractor that worked with Akron Children's Hospital on a very unique project. I'd like to thank them for agreeing to do this presentation today. I think what you're going to find is that there's a unique process for how to handle your capital expenditures, and we'd like to walk through that. We would like to ask you to hold your questions until the end. We will allow time at the end of the presentation to address those issues, but we want to make sure we get a chance to connect all the dots. This is a fairly complicated subject matter, and if you see the whole process, I think it'll help you be a little clearer. Also, if you're paying attention, when we get to the end of the presentation, you'll figure out how to actually get a free book that was written relative to this process, and we'll take care of getting that to you, but you got to pay attention. I can tell you are. Thank you. So our objective today is to show you a successful process to reduce costs and improve operating margins with the use of lean and IPD. Here's the definition of IPD. I'll let you look at that. I'm not going to say something you don't already know, but the healthcare industry is seeing higher costs, lower reimbursements, rather non-existent net operating income, and I mean, that's why we're here, right? How do we do it different? How do we do it better? The most important takeaway from today's presentation that I want you to have is that if you're spending capital dollars and not using lean construction or lean design, it's highly likely that you're wasting part of that investment. There's a way to do it better and a way to do it different. The current state of the way projects are designed and built probably ends up in a situation where you have the wrong space, you have the wrong size space, you have the wrong configuration of the space, and you have the wrong systems that are being incorporated into the project. Complicate that by, or compound that with your FTE costs. You're working your people harder, which means you probably have lower morale, need more people to accomplish the task. All of those are working against what you're trying to accomplish, and you're getting lower quality results. The process that we're going to talk about is going to yield higher costs, higher morale, it's going to yield higher compliance with what you're looking for the outcome to be, and you're going to have lower cost and higher morale within your team. So we want to start with the end in mind, and what I'd like you to understand is that the results of this process, we took 34,000 square feet out of the design without affecting the program or the ability to deliver on the results. We took 2 months out of the process and we cut $45 million out of the finished product from what the original cost was. That cost was verified by a third party. It was industry average for what that facility should have cost. And using this process that's very unique, and the rest of the team will describe that, we came up with an unbelievable result. So what is the project? It's a 100-bed neonatal intensive care, high-risk delivery, new emergency department, and outpatient surgery, 366,000 square feet of space. So that's what the project was, and we cut $45 million out of that project. So with that, I would like to introduce Sherry Valentine, who's going to walk through the first phase of how the project got started.
Okay. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
I'm going to try to do this two-fisted here, so we'll see what happens. So let me tell you a little bit about Akron Children's Hospital. We are ranked 8th in the United States as a children's hospital, and we are 2 campuses. We have one in Akron, we have one in Youngstown. We also have over 25 primary care offices in Northeast Ohio and 80 plus specialty locations where children can be seen in their own communities. We have 5,200 employees and over 800 medical staff. This is a very important year for us too, because besides the K. Jewelry Pavilion opening, which we're also excited about, this is also our 125th anniversary. So the hospital's gone in 1890 from a one-room daycare center to the hospital that we are today, and so we're very excited about that. So we started our Lean Six Sigma journey in 2008 with a very wise COO at the time, Mark Watson, who's here in the audience. But Mark recognized very early that we're in a very competitive environment. Akron Children's Hospital is a standalone. We are not affiliated with a university or a big health system. We're a standalone children's hospital, and we are one of 8 children's hospitals in the state of Ohio alone. Very competitive environment. So Mark knew early on in 2008 that we needed to come up with a way to continue the quality care that we're providing, but providing it with the best value. And after doing a lot of research, he found that Lean Six Sigma was probably the way to go. And so, there's a process to this. There's tools, principles, and systems, and we're using the Toyota production system. We have a lot of Shingo, if you're familiar with Shingo principles, in our program. And we have come to the foundational house where we're looking at all of those tools, principles, and systems to forward move this hospital. Excellent quality and great value. So our goal for this project was we knew that we needed a new NICU. Our NICU was very small. There were 4 infants per room, 2 nurses, 110 square feet per baby. With today's medical equipment, 100 square feet and a baby and parents and nurses and doctors, it's a pretty crowded situation. We also didn't need a new emergency room as far as number of rooms, but we needed to make it a little easier to work in. We have an outpatient surgery area where the dream of our surgeons was to make this place function as though it were 50 miles away, that we could get the efficiencies of outpatient surgery center right in our own organization. And then a special care delivery unit. We know that we have some infants that the mothers might be quite healthy, but the infants need immediate care, and instead of having us go to them and then drive them 30 or 40 minutes away from their mom, to have that baby deliver in our hospital and have our experts right there is the goal and the dream. So when we talk about Lean Six Sigma in this project, our leaders, our senior leaders, were very forward thinking and saying, we've been having some good success with Lean Six Sigma. So I think what we need to do is see if we can build this building using those principles. And started to do a little research, and we looked for some good partners, and we certainly found those in Welty and also Bolt. And we started the process. And the old saying of going slow to go fast? People look at this and say, you started your project actually it was January of 2012, and you didn't break ground until May of 13. That's because we had a lot of work to do first. And so what we did was we worked with parents and children, focus groups about what they wanted this building to be like. And then we went to the actual users. We went to the parents, we went to the ED staff, we went to the NICU staff, and we got them into teams, and we said, what does your place look like now? And where do you want it to be? And some of those, if you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma, you'll know that the things that you want to change are called storm clouds. So we looked at those storm clouds, and some of those storm clouds, a lot of those storm clouds, were related to the physical plant, the physical facility. And so we took all of that work, and we said, okay, where do you want it to be? This is our value stream maps. They're messy, but they tell a good story. And then we said, where do you want to be? We want to go from this to this. We want it to be cleaner. We want the processes to be cleaner. And so we started, okay, what do we want this to look like? Next thing we did was lean education, and we took every single person that was part of this project through lean education, 2 days about flow. We talked about waste of healthcare, we talked about patient flow, and we had them come up with what they wanted it to look like. And once they put that perfect thing down, we took a picture of it and dumped it out and had them do it again. And we had them do it 7 times. They were very frustrated, but at the end we came up with a drawing that they thought would really work. It's not the same as being in the space. So we built the space. And what we did was we put 3 times, we built 60,000 square feet, every single room in a warehouse. And we brought in all the equipment, the real equipment. We brought the surgeons, we brought the physicians. I will tell you that Mike Trainer really had a hard time with me spending $80,000 on cardboard. A really hard time. What we were able to do is we would have them work in the space with the real equipment and the real scenarios, and then we would have them say what worked and what didn't work. And then while they were having coffee, we were turning their pages, that sort of thing, the build team would go back and they would rebuild it again. We'd say, try it again. And we tried it again, and we tried it again until we got the right space, the doors in the right space, the hallways the right width. And we had architects there. We didn't do this by ourselves to keep us in code. And, but what we learned from this was just amazing, just amazing. There's nothing like standing in the space. And we just, as I said, we kept changing that process. This is our current COO, Grace Wakalchek, who's out there moving cardboard because she's trying to learn the process as well. So we did the Plan, Do, Check Act that you're probably familiar with. And we came up with, okay, now it's time to build. We use the same lean principles when we use a pool plan. I don't know if you're familiar with a pool plan, but it's the most responsible moment to do something. And you're pulling, you get to the goal, and you pull the work toward that goal. We did it all with sticky notes, and I think Don will talk a little bit more about that. So what did our, we had surgeons, we had anesthesiologists, nurses, clerical people on these teams. What do you think that they thought about this process? They were out in a warehouse, a very unfamiliar environment for them.
It's a process. Lean design, it's a great process. I guess the best way to describe it, it's like the old Chinese proverb where you say, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I might remember, involve me and I'll understand. And when you involve everybody in the process and take all their collective strengths, you end up with a facility that will be a benefit to the children and their families of our community.
We have been engaged in multiple meetings, and then we came out with a design. It looked really good on paper, and when we came here the first day, it was already mocked up, and when you walk through it, the physicality, the part that you do not see on paper, made us have lots of questions. And the way patients move around, the way the surgeon moves around, the way the anesthesiologists move around, nurses, the workflow altogether made that layout is very impractical for an ambulatory surgery center. So this is where the wheels started rolling, and we started looking at other alternatives.
Well, we determined that we need 8 operating rooms, and it'll be a self-contained unit. It's basically built with the premise that we're in a remote location, off-site 50 miles away, and we have the surgery center that has to operate and take care of thousands of children a year. So we've accomplished that task. We've built a unit that can accomplish all those goals.
There are multiple goals. A, we're looking at patient safety, number one. How can we make the ambulatory surgery center a safe place for patients? B, patient satisfaction. Yes, you can be as safe as possible, but patients do not like it, or families do not like the layout or the workflow. Then, obviously, the medical staff, surgeons, anesthesiologists, nurses, housekeepers, everybody involved. You have to look at all these aspects and angles to make it a success story.
Our mission was to design an ambulatory surgery center that would provide flexible, adaptable, universal space to allow us to grow into the year 2022 and beyond, and we've accomplished that mission.
So, the folks that were probably the most skeptical about this are our surgeons and our anesthesiologists. They just loved this process. And when we had our first surgery last Tuesday, May 5th, Dr. Milo came out and said, it's just perfect. The one thing that we did do, and these folks will talk a little more about, is you're right, I spent a lot of money in the warehouse, probably $500,000, and that doesn't include the salaries of people. It doesn't include the lost revenue from the work while they were in the warehouse. But, as Dawn said, we might have spent $1 million, but we saved $45 million. And even more important is we got a space where people love to work in it. Already we've heard, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. This is exactly where I thought things were going to be. So it turned out to be a great process for us. So from what Dawn had said, and we'll move right into Mike here, but what Dawn had said is that, we saved 34,000 square feet. We did that because we were in the space and we were able to say, do you need this space? Is it in the right space? Is it large enough? You know, we weren't trying to get big, we were trying to get right-sized, right place, right size. And you know, how often does this happen? The surgeons, after the first couple of days, went to COO and said, I don't think we need 8 ORs. I think we can do a 6, and we can probably start with 4. When does that happen? And it was, it was because they really were able to stand in the space and realize the efficiencies that they could gain. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim Ziga, and I have the privilege of working at Akron Children's Hospital. And I really have the privilege of being part of this project. This project is absolutely phenomenal. And it's in large part due to the fact that Mark Watson had the wisdom and the vision to convince our management that integrated lean project delivery was the true way to proceed with this type of a project rather than relying on the old standard traditional methods of construction and design. In a normal construction project and design project, the owner would have multiple contracts with all the different parties. In the integrated lean project delivery method, we have one 5-party agreement that we started out with, and the parties initially were Hasenstab Architects and Welty Building Company. This was important because both Hasenstab and Welty have done tremendous jobs for us in the past on other projects with the hospital, so we had a comfort level that with you know, known quality and the known personnel that we would be able to pull this together as a team. But none of us had IPD experience, so it was important for us to go out and try to find that experience in the marketplace. Went through a long, drawn-out process of interviewing different companies, and we elected HKS to support Hasenstab on the design side, and we elected the Bolt company that had IPD experience to support Welty on the construction side. We started out with a 2-day session where we got the 5 players together. We sat down and we kind of talked through what's IPD mean to each of us. You know, what are the principles of IPD that we want to bring in to this project? And we all kind of got on the same page by going through that first project, that first process. We then, you know, I went back. I tried to capture the principles and the beliefs that we developed in that meeting, and I put it into a contract which was drafted specifically for this project. We didn't use traditional contracts on this project. The 5-party agreement was drafted for this particular project, incorporating those principles. We then spent 5 days, we spent an entire week, started Monday, ended Friday afternoon, negotiating the contract as a team. Probably had 20 people in the room, and we actually put the contract language up on a screen. We did real live editing as we were working through every line of the contract, every principle in the contract, how the contract was going to come together and what the responsibilities were. At the end of the day, we had a contract that we could move forward with, and as we started bringing on additional members to the team, both on the design side and on the construction side, and it's important to understand that design and construction were working together right from the beginning. You know, this wasn't a situation where we had the design team in a traditional method would design it, hand it to construction, and they would figure out what's wrong with it. Everybody was in the room together. We brought the structural people, we brought the MEP, we brought in some of the key subs that were going to be doing the curtain wall and the fire suppression. Everybody worked together, and as they were brought on, they signed joining agreements that effectively brought them into the agreement, into our 5-party agreement, and they agreed to comply with the five-party agreement. And most importantly, they agreed that they would abide by the determinations of the PLT. The project leadership team was set up with a senior executive team. Don Taylor was a member of that team, along with Grace Wakulczyk, our COO, that you heard Sherry mention. We also had a representative from Bolt, and we had a representative from Hasenstab. Those four individuals were basically there to help mentor the project leadership team, and in the event that the project leadership team couldn't come to resolution on issues, it would get kicked up to the senior executive team for decision. I believe in the entire project that went on for 2 years, 2.5 years, we had three issues that were sent up to the SET. Otherwise, the project leadership team had full control and management of the project. And this is important that you appreciate that this wasn't the owner sitting listening to the project leadership team. The owner was actually a member on the project leadership team. Patrick Oakes here in the audience was the Welty representative on the project leadership team. And this group of 7 individuals literally ran the project, made all the decisions, and ended up, turning out an absolutely marvelous product. And it's important to understand that they had total control of the management of the project, and they had to reach all decisions unanimously. So in that entire process, they had 3 situations where they couldn't agree, and it had to go up to the SET. Otherwise, those people sat in a room, and every day, every week, just working on this project. We also had project innovation teams that were created by the PLT, and each of those teams were designed with multidisciplinary membership made up of all the different members, and they were assigned specific components of the project to try to figure out how's the best way to do it and how can we save money when we're doing it. And so there was a real competition with the project implementation innovation teams to try to come up with a better mousetrap, but also to be able to report back to the entire group that they found ways to save money on the project. In order to require collaboration and expect collaboration from the team, and also to make sure everybody had skin in the game, all the IPD team members through the contract waived liability against each other. So it was a no-fault situation here. Everybody in the room was free to say whatever they thought was appropriate, and they didn't have to worry about saying something wrong and ending up being in a pickle after because of somebody claiming that they made a mistake. Everyone had their profit fixed at the beginning of the contract, so that you didn't have to worry about whether or not you were losing scope, and therefore under a normal percentage relationship you were going to be losing profit. By fixing everyone's profit as they drove dollars out of the project, they weren't hurting themselves. Their profit was fixed, and so the incentive there was to just find ways to save money in the project. In order to keep everybody focused, everyone put their profit at risk. So if we didn't have a successful project, then the profit that was allocated in the target cost would eventually be spent on trying to finish the project. And in worst case scenario, all of the participants would go away with essentially a time and material contract, no profit. Everyone was asked to participate in the incentive compensation plan, which was set up to incentivize all of the players. In this particular project, we created a project-specific insurance program, an owner-controlled insurance program, which included not only your general liability and your builder's risk, which is traditional in a construction contract, but it also included the professional design side. Because again, you have to realize that we had the contractor sitting in the same meetings during the design, making recommendations, and we didn't want people to say, you know, I can't participate because my insurance doesn't cover me. That's outside of my expertise. And then everyone on the project agreed to a binding dispute resolution process, which was essentially, if there was an issue, it went to the SET. If the SET couldn't agree, and again, it had to be unanimous at the SET level, then it would go to a pre-selected arbitrator/mediator. So we knew exactly who the person was going to be that was going to make the final recommendation back to the SET. There were the target cost was the price tag for the project, and it was set at $180 million. That was set early in the project, and that became the target to beat. The cost was made up of reimbursable cost, which was essentially time and materials for the project. The owner had the right to audit those costs, and the team, when we were developing the contract, we established what reimbursable cost would be in the way of like wages and salaries. We had a grid showing exactly what components of a person's wages would be included as a reimbursable cost, and then on the material side, everything was competitively bid. The project contingency component was different. Again, in order to bring this collaboration together, we took all the contingency in the project and we put it in one bucket. So those dollars were there for whatever team, whatever discipline needed the dollars in order to correct an oversight. Those funds were shared by everyone, and they were fixed on the front end, again, with a dollar amount. And then finally, the project profit was a separate bucket that everyone put their project dollars into, and to the extent that we didn't exceed the target cost, those dollars would get distributed to the different participants. The incentive compensation plan that we put together was created to reward the team for performing at a best-in-class level. We kind of took the approach that from a profit standpoint, if it's an average project, then you should get this much profit. But if it's truly a best-in-class performance, then the owner agreed to pay an incentive to reward everyone for that performance. And what we agreed to was essentially to pay 50% more than their expected profit as the final potential reward. But because this wasn't your traditional contract where contractor had certain risk, designers had certain risk, in this project the owner actually takes on untraditional risk. So for that reason, we asked that the team put 10% of their expected profit at risk and help fund the incentive pool with that 10% number. So in this example, for a $100 potential reward, 60 of it was profit at risk. That went in the profit bucket, and then $40 went in the incentive compensation bucket. The project, in order to obtain the incentive, we had success metrics that everyone was expected to meet, and again, this was developed by the PLT with everybody's input, but the final decision as to the success metrics and how we were going to measure them was determined by the PLT. The 8 metrics that you see up there, one that was very important to us was local participation. We had an 85% target for local participation. Team performance, the team actually scored themselves with a survey that they took on a regular scheduled basis. And surprisingly, they were very, very open and frank about whether or not they thought we were really hitting the collaboration goals that we were striving for. Quality and staff and family satisfaction, those are metrics that will be tested in the fall after the facility is up and running. But ultimately, whatever score they get, you multiply that score by the dollars in the incentive compensation bucket. We decided to split the incentive, or to fund the incentive compensation by this table here. The first $2 million was split 50-50 between owner and the team. And that was because, number one, it was kind of low-hanging fruit, and number two, the owner had a lot of expenses on the startup side that you know, I was hoping to recover some dollars for Mike so that he could sleep at night. And then the next $5.5 million of savings all went to the team. Okay, and this was something that came up during our discussions early on in the contract negotiations. We wanted to have truly achievable goals here so that people felt like the incentive was achievable and that it would get paid out, and it wasn't just a carrot hanging out on a stick. So the hospital agreed to pay the next $5.5 million of savings into the incentive pool so that at that point it was fully funded. Everyone, if they scored 100% on the incentive compensation or on the success metrics, they would get all of their profit plus 50% on top of that. This is kind of how it worked out with a target cost of $180,000. You had a total of $10 million of profit. $9 million of that went into the profit at risk bucket. $1 million of it dropped down into the incentive compensation bucket. The contingency pool was really where the dollars were going to be saved that would flow up into that incentive compensation bucket, and that would fund the payout for the incentive compensation. And then reimbursable costs were set at 160. These are just numbers that I can add quickly. In this scenario, where the actual cost equals the target cost, under the contract, the hospital pays out the reimbursable cost of $170,000. The profit at risk was earned because they met the target cost, so everyone received their full profit at risk number of $9 million, and then of the incentive compensation, if you recall, that $1 million was funded by the team, so that gets split 50-50 between the owner and the team. In the second scenario, where the actual costs are below, you see that now the hospital and the team each splits $1 million, we split the first $2 million, so we each get $1 million. The next $5,500,000 all goes to the team, and then anything above that $7.5 million gets split 90% to the hospital, 10% to the team. And you need to appreciate that the hospital really didn't want to be in that third tier. I mean, we preferred that the dollars actually go into the project. And so the PLT spent a great deal of time and effort to try to get a lot of things that were kind of put on a wish list. As the money was freed up and they realized that the project could afford it, a lot of that went back into the project so that the hospital actually got more than it expected. I think we did end up in the third tier, but there wasn't a lot of money in that bucket. And then in this scenario where you have the actual cost exceeding the target cost, the team would forfeit all of its profit. The hospital would pay time and material for whatever it took to get the project done. And at the end of the day, the hospital would have its project completed, but the team would basically have received payment for their time and material. There would be no ICL distributions, incentive compensation distributions paid out, and in this case, all the contingency was burned up, so there was nothing to flow up into the incentive pool.
I'm Mike Trainer, I'm the CFO, and I can tell you from the outset, I was against this whole process, IPD. If you think about it a minute, the traditional way to do a project is you design it quickly, and then you bid it, and then you build it. This is completely different. This is a collaboration with the owner, the architect, and the contractor. This is kind of a trust me arrangement. And so as a CFO, this was not my cup of tea. In addition, we spent a year in the warehouse. What? We're going to spend a year in a warehouse, which we had to acquire 60,000 foot warehouse, pay the utilities on it, plus the staff. The staff went in and out of this warehouse for a year. Staff include physicians. We took them out of complement. We were losing revenue. The CFO is against this. But as time went by, I became a disciple. In what they call the big room, all the trades work together all week long and then report out every Friday. And I made a habit of going to those report outs. And that's where the costs came tumbling down. The cooperation between the trades was unheard of. And traditionally, as a project progresses, you have owner-architect meetings every week, and they become quite contentious. And change orders start being pulled out. And in the end, who loses? The owner. And in this case, we had almost no change orders because everyone was collaborating. The line of people who didn't believe in this started with me and went on to our underwriter, Goldman Sachs. This was new to them. We had to sell them on it. Then after that, the Akron-Bath-Copley Bond District. We financed this with 50% bonds, very conservatively, 30-year bonds. We had working capital we'd set aside for this project, just like buying a house with 50% down. So it's very conservative. But the Akron-Bath-Copley Bond District, who issue our bonds, the integrated project delivery, what's this? No bidding? So they had to be convinced. And then finally, the rating agencies and Ernst & Young, our auditors, had to be convinced that this was a viable project methodology. So I'm going to have Alicia now take us through the process we went through to finance our project.
Thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, really, the portion of the financing, figuring out how to pay the building, the most unique part probably was getting first the underwriter on board with how this would really work versus the typical design bid build process. But once the beautiful building was designed, we had to figure out how we were going to pay for it, and of course that involved us putting together the forecast. And as Michael said, 50% came out of financing, 50% came out of equity because of the debt capacity potential that we had. Once we had the underwriter on board, then we put together the rest of the bond team, and many of you that have already issued debt, this is really nothing new at this point. Obviously, getting all the approvals from our boards. We had weekly status calls to make sure that we were going to get things wrapped up timely enough for when we needed the money to start to flow. We actually did have our 2 bond rating agencies come on site because we wanted them to actually see the big hole in the ground at that point, as it were. And then we had Grace Wakalchik actually come and talk about IPD directly with them, again, to get them on board that this, in fact, is a viable way to build buildings. We were watching the markets as to when we wanted, with our underwriters, when we wanted to go to market to actually sell the bonds to get the best rate, interest rate. And then the day of selling the bonds was, that's always exciting for us finance people to see where the rates are going to come in. And then, of course, we had to develop a process whereby we had good documentation to be able to reimburse invoices so that we were paying for reimbursable expenses according to all those requirements of tax-exempt bonds. And then eventually, with the building just opening here at the beginning of May, we will be closing out the project here in 2015.
What was key, I think, to what Alicia described is that we had numerous meetings with bond buyers to, again, explain the integrated project delivery process. This was a leap for a lot of people who were depending upon our ability to repay these bonds. And the communication was the key for us in our efforts. And we did get AA rates at the time that we issued the bonds. We were very pleased with the financing. So with that, I'll turn it back to Don for the
Thanks,
closing
Mike.
remarks.
Thanks, Alicia. So I got so excited about the results that we had got. I forgot to give you a little background on Welty Building Company, so I'll catch you up on that. So we've been around since 1945, headquartered in Akron, offices in Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, Houston, and soon to be Pittsburgh. To say that Welty is a traditional contractor would be like saying FedEx is just a trucking company. We focus on what we call building science. Yes, you still have to pound nails, pour concrete, stack bricks, just as good as everybody else, but there's a whole lot more that goes into this, the psychology and the science of what we're building and why we're building it and how we form teams. So, the end of my commercial. What we wanted to talk about, and this is self-revealing in our industry, we have a problem. The construction industry has a problem, and we are on the forefront of trying to deal with that. Over the course of the last 50 years, you'll see by this chart, the construction industry, the construction worker in the industry is 10% less productive than they were 50 years ago. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, that is a ridiculous number. With all the automation, the computers, the power equipment that we have, we're now less productive. Now, there's lots of reasons for that. One of them, probably the most important one, is we just didn't pay attention and the cost just got passed on. Well, that's got to come to an end. Much like hospitals having to get more productive and think about waste in your process, we have to do the same thing. And the construction industry has done a study, and what they found is that only 40% of a construction worker's time is something that you would be interested in paying for. Does it add value? Only 40%. That means there's 60% waste. You're probably not interested in paying for somebody standing around waiting for direction. You're probably not interested in paying for somebody to move material from here to there. Now, the goal of getting rid of all waste that's theoretical. When the way they define waste, we would not be able to get rid of it all. There are 8 wastes, and we are using the same system that Deming used, or the Toyota method used in identifying waste. And if you've got a center of excellence or you're working on Lean or Six Sigma, you're familiar with these. We focus on every one of those to try and reduce it. The goal being we get it as low as we can. On Children's Hospital, we were able to take about 1/3 of the 60% waste out. We were able to get 20% out of the project by applying these principles. It's a lot more complicated than this slide shows, but I wanted to put it in 3 buckets that we could talk about. So we see it as 3 specific levers that we're able to use. One is the innovation. Sherry talked about what happened at the front end to make sure that we're building the right thing. In some cases, we have spaces that we cut in half, and they are able to see the same number of patients that they were before because the space was designed efficiently to be able to have the right flow. In other cases, we have the exact same amount of space that was there before, and the space has now been designed because of growth to see twice the number of patients or do twice the number of procedures that they were doing in the previous space that had not been right-sized and not gone through the Lean process. The next piece is productivity. I'm going to talk about that. And then the last piece is every project has contingency. And if we do the first 2 things right, we aren't spending the contingency that was built into the project. It becomes savings. And contingency's time, contingency's dollars, contingency's brain damage that goes along with having to spend money and make up time. So those 3 pieces, if you look at them, are what form the process that we go through. So let me talk a little bit about just one example of hundreds that we went through. And sitting in the second row over here are some of the folks that were involved in the actual day-to-day making this happen. Paul Beck's our project executive, Paul Beck's our project manager, Patrick Oakes our project executive. Were involved in this project from the beginning. But one of our key challenges was, how do we improve time, and how do we improve the amount of time that we're going to be involved in building the actual structure? The structure is important, but there's not a lot can happen until we get the building frame and the floors up, and that's when we can really start rolling on a project. So we really wanted to focus on that. So we looked at what the building process was going to be for the structure. We ended up going with concrete. We could have used steel. It would have taken less time and it would have been less expensive. After going through the analysis, it was the team's decision that long-term for the hospital, that concrete was going to be a better structure. It was going to give them more flexibility and a lower operating and maintenance cost for the building, so we wanted to go with that, but we needed to drive time out of that process. So we started with one of the things we did early was we called it game day tapes. So we actually took an activity, videotaped it with GoPros, then we brought the team in who had all been trained in lean boot camp. So they understood what to look for in waste. They understood what their role was on the project. So we had them look at the tape. We then analyzed what had happened, and what you'll see is that there is a significant amount of inconsistency. These are each one of those cycles, and you can see how inconsistent they are. We brought them in, brought the team down, bought them pizza, had them analyze this, and they quickly recognized that there were opportunities that they could improve on and that we can incorporate. We also, after doing the analysis, we also quickly recognized that there was a safety issue in the way we were doing the work, and we ended up adding 2.5 minutes to every one of the cycle times that we were going through. Now we're going the wrong direction, but if it means that we're safe, that's important, and this being an OSIP, as Tim had described, we were self-insured on the project, so we could not afford to have accidents. At least that was going to affect the overall cost of the project. So we were very safety conscious. So after working through this 4-blocker kind of outlines what the team analyzed and what their opportunities were, we came back. We had 2.5 minutes we added to safety. We ended up netting out 2 minutes on each one of the cycle times. Now you're saying, now why are you wasting my time talking about 2 minutes? That's probably a good question. I probably asked the same question to my team. So after spending all that time working through it, well, the reason is that what happened was we were going to drive this cycle time 8,640 times. So this particular cycle that we analyzed was going to happen 8,000 times throughout the process. Taking those 2 minutes out of each cycle, doing it safer and faster and more predictably by involving the people on the front line, we were actually able to save 36 workdays on the project. That, when you look at the cost of driving a $200 million project, what your general conditions and your daily cost is, that's a significant amount of money, let alone the $95,000 or $96,000 that was just in the direct labor on that crew. Now those 36 days are rather important to us because over the course of the project, we had agreed on the number of weather days that what constituted a day that we couldn't work. We happened to we got lucky and hit the lottery for the worst 2 winters that we've had in a while. So we had 37 delay days that we were due. We could have gone to the hospital and said, hey, the weather was bad on these days, we couldn't work, we need to extend the completion date of the project. Well, because we picked up those 36 days, we made up for the 37.5 days of delay that we were due to weather. Had we not done that, we'd have been talking about pushing back the opening rather than moving the opening up. Ultimately, some of the other things that we did on the project gained 2 months in the delivery of the project. So we were actually 2 months early in spite of 37 days or almost 2 months of delays on the project. So that's one tool that we had used on the project that was specific and different than you've probably seen on any other construction project you've been involved in. These are some of the other things: target value design, building quality, small wins program, last planner system that Sherry talked about, pole planning, safety awareness. These are all specific programs that involved understanding the psychology of the team that we were dealing with to be able to make the project successful. So we get asked all the time, what makes a project, what made this project successful? What I can tell you is that we could have never done this And I listened to this process, and as Mike described it, he was against it when we started. I can't imagine anybody in this room rushing out and going, boy, I want to go back and talk to the C-suite about doing this IPD thing where nobody's got any risk and we've all indemnified each other. That'd be a pretty short conversation. So we're not selling you on that. We're just telling you that it does work, and when you get to the point where this is something you want to implement, we'd be certainly happy to talk to you about how to make that happen. But the reality is that without the owner, Akron Children's Hospital, believing in this, it would have never happened. They wanted different results than they were getting before, and they were willing to invest in making that happen. We didn't know anything about lean. We had started our lean journey, but we had been applying it in the office to processes that we were using, not on the job site. You need a design firm that has people that are willing to work outside their comfort zone. That sounds easy. That might be the hardest thing that we had to deal with in the entire project. People have a way of doing things, and they want to stay with them. We had to take them out of their comfort zone to be innovative, to think differently, to accept different materials than we otherwise would have been able to incorporate in the project. We had to have a construction manager that was flexible and that was willing to plan and was in a control with. We're going to talk about this. We're going to work through what the issues are, not a control over. Hey, this is the construction part of the project. Get out of my way. I'm responsible for means and methods. Let me do my job. It was a control with. We educated the team on what needed to happen. We talked about what the downside and the upside was going to be. We worked together to get the results we're looking for. And then last, an understanding from all of the parties that we had aligned the incentives and that we were going to operate in a blame-free environment. We had plenty of things go wrong, but it wasn't the traditional, well, let's figure out who to pin this on. It was, okay, we had something go wrong. Let's fix the problem, and then let's analyze the root cause of why we had the problem so we don't have that problem again. And it's really significant to be operating in that blame-free environment, that you're comfortable in being able to actually take a risk. Some of the things we were doing, you were off balance. It was out of your comfort zone. But we were able to come up with those ideas, incorporate them without the risk of being blamed personally. So that kind of sums up what our presentation today was. And if there's anything that I don't want you to forget before you leave today is that there is a way that you can make the most of your capital expenditures, and we'd like to see you incorporate lean in that process. So thanks again for your time, and remember, if you drop off a business card, we'll get you one of those books free of charge. Thank you.